All right, so today we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to be, like glancing at a company from a distance. We're actually going to try to get a real, deep understanding of what makes this business tick. And we're going to do that by going straight to the source. We're going to be deep diving into the China Resources Beer 2023 annual report.
Yeah, think of it as like a shortcut to getting all the crucial insights about their business.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because we know that, for busy folks out there poring over hundreds of pages, as, these dense financial documents, it's not always an option.
Yeah. So we're going to try to distill it down to the really essential things. Like,
Yeah.
what are the big trends that are shaping their business? How's their overall financial health looking? And most importantly, like, what's their strategy? Where are they headed in the future? All that good stuff without, getting bogged down in every single detail.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
an annual report, it's like this treasure trove of information, right?
Mm.
You got everything in there from how their different business segments actually operate to the specifics of their financial performance,
Mm.
how they're trying to create value for their shareholders, what their outlook is on the future. We've gone through it all, and we're going to unpack it together.
Sounds good.
One of the first things that really jumped out at me, I gotta say, was the launch of their Nong Lai product line back in September.
Oh, yeah.
That was it's pretty interesting, this whole idea of connecting their brand to China's, you know, thousand-year-old brewing culture.
Mhm.
It's like they're really leaning into this concept of heritage and authenticity.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, the whole craft brewery movement that we've seen,
Mhm.
globally.
Hmm.
This idea that people are looking for something, that's a bit more special, a bit more connected to tradition. I wonder, where this non-lie brand fits within their larger portfolio. Is it like a premium offering? Are they targeting like a different kind of consumer with this?
That's a great question. And speaking of reaching a wider audience, we got to talk about their sponsorship of the Hangzhou Asian Games,
Hmm.
also back in September, being the official beer sponsor for such a massive international event,
Huge, yeah.
providing their beers for all the ceremonies, athletes, guests. That's got to be a huge boost for their brand recognition.
Absolutely. You're talking about exposure to potentially billions of people worldwide.
Exactly. And it's not just about, getting their logo out there right.
Yeah.
It's about associating their brand with this, really positive, exciting event.
It's about creating those good vibes.
Yeah, exactly. But from a business perspective, I'm also curious, what kind of data are they actually tracking to measure the return on investment from a sponsorship like that?
Mm.
Are they looking at things like brand recall changes in like online search volume, maybe even sales spikes in specific regions?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Sponsorships like these, they're not just about splashing your brand everywhere.
Yeah.
They're really strategic marketing investments. And to really understand the impact, you got to be tracking those key metrics. Are people remembering the brand more after seeing it at the games? Are more people searching for it online? Are sales actually going up in certain markets? They're probably looking at a whole range of data points, maybe even consumer surveys to see how their brand image is perceived after the event.
Makes sense. Now, something else that caught my eye was their approach to risk management. They have this very uh, formalized risk identification process,
Oh, yeah, that's really
and
interesting.
it seems pretty thorough.
It does. It's like they're not just hoping for the best.
Yeah.
They're actively trying to identify and assess all these potential risks.
Yeah, they do these annual assessments, both from the top down,
Yeah.
starting with the overall corporate strategy, and also from the bottom up,
Mm.
getting input from all the different business units.
That's smart. So they're looking at it from all angles. What could go wrong at the highest level and what could go wrong, down in the trenches.
Exactly. They're looking at things like sales, marketing, operations, production, HR. It's very comprehensive.
And they're also considering the external environment.
Hmm.
What are the broader economic, political, technological trends that could impact their business? This isn't just some, check the box exercise.
Yeah.
They're really trying to get ahead of potential problems.
Yeah, it really seems like a proactive approach to risk mitigation. Now, speaking of getting ahead of the curve, let's talk about their digital transformation efforts.
Yeah.
They really seem to have stepped up their game in 2023.
Definitely. I mean, setting up a whole CR beer digitization committee, that's a big statement.
It is. It shows that they're serious about it. And that increase in their digitalization coverage from 44 to 56% in just 1 year, that's impressive.
Yeah, those are some significant gains.
Some of the specific numbers are pretty mind-blowing, like a 90% improvement in order execution for procurement. That's huge. What kind of technologies are they actually implementing to achieve these kinds of improvements? Are we talking like, upgraded enterprise resource planning systems,
Yeah.
maybe automation of some of their manual processes, better data analytics.
Probably a combination of all of the above. And, these technologies can lead to some serious cost savings and efficiency gains. But of course, there's always the other side of the coin. I wonder what kind of potential downsides to this rapid digitalization they're considering in their risk management process.
Right.
Are they thinking about things like cybersecurity risks, the need to constantly train and upskill their workforce? What about the possibility of, system disruptions or outages?
Yeah, those are all valid concerns. And it's worth noting that they actually received recognition for their digital transformation efforts from both the China Resources Group and the State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission.
Right.
That really underscores the importance they're placing on this.
Yeah, it's not just some internal initiative. It's something that's being recognized at the highest levels. Now, another area where they seem to be really making strides is sustainability. Their focus on green plant construction and low carbon operations, it's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. Having 4 plants rated as national level green plants and 3 at the provincial level in 2023, that's a strong statement. Plus, they're actively developing these carbon neutral plant programs for their pilot locations. Shows they're really walking the walk.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about sustainability, but it's another thing to actually invest in these kinds of initiatives. And then there's the establishment of their CR Beer Carbon Neutrality R&D Center in January of 2024.
Wow.
Having the only R&D center in the country that's specifically dedicated to carbon neutrality innovation for both beer and baijiu.
That's pretty remarkable.
It's huge. They're
Yeah.
really positioning themselves as leaders in this space, and
Yeah.
their research scope is pretty broad. They're looking at everything from soft science, like policy recommendations, to very concrete R&D projects focused on green technologies. They're even collaborating with universities. It makes you wonder what kind of impact this could have on the broader industry. Could they potentially set new standards or drive innovation that goes beyond just their own company?
Yeah, it's like they're pushing the entire sector forward.
Mm.
And it's not just about, the big picture initiatives. They're also paying attention to the details like green packaging.
Absolutely. I mean, getting to 100% green procurement rate for their bottle caps and cartons by the end of 2023, that's a significant achievement.
It is.
And then there are their efforts to reduce packaging waste from their suppliers, like increasing the amount of imported malt that they transport in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
That alone saved them an estimated 7.23 million packaging bags in 2023. And of course, the successful testing of those lightweight beer bottles, that's another win for sustainability.
Every little bit helps, right? Especially when you're operating at their scale. Now, along with environmental responsibility, they also seem very focused on product quality and safety.
Yeah, for sure. Setting up a dedicated CR beer food safety risk evaluation working group, that's a pretty clear signal. And they have these really comprehensive quality and food safety management systems in place. They've got all sorts of international certifications like FSSC 22000, ISO HACCP. It's reassuring to know that they're taking this stuff seriously.
It is. I remember a while back there was a big news story about, a major food recall.
Oh, yeah.
And it just highlights how crucial these behind-the-scenes processes are for maintaining consumer trust.
Absolutely. It's not something you can afford to mess around with. And it's great that they're also focusing on developing their internal food safety management capabilities. They had 224 people pass that food safety management personnel ability test in 2023. That's a lot of trained experts.
Yeah, they're definitely investing in their people. Now, one project that really caught my eye was the Research on Quality Improvement of Domestic Beer Barley project. It seems like a really smart move strategically.
It's hitting multiple birds with one stone. They're addressing raw material safety, which is obviously crucial for any food or beverage company. They're aiming to revitalize China's domestic beer barley industry, which could reduce their reliance on imports in the long run. And they're doing all of this through strategic collaborations with local partners and a lot of R&D. The fact that they're planning to establish a pilot cultivation base by 2025 shows their long-term commitment.
It's a win-win all around. Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk about some of the key financial highlights. What were some of the most important takeaways from their 2023 performance?
Well, one of the first things that stands out is that they were in a net cash position at the end of both 2023 and 2022. It's a really strong indicator of financial health. It basically means that they have more cash on hand than they have debt. It's a sign of good liquidity. They're not strapped for cash.
That's always a good thing. And in terms of their currency holdings, it looks like they're pretty heavily weighted towards renminbi.
Yeah, as of December 31st, 2023, a whopping 99.1% of their cash and bank deposits were in RMB, with just tiny fractions in Hong Kong dollars and US dollars. It makes sense. Their primary market is China.
Right. Now let's look at the liability side of things. The current liabilities were over 24 billion RMB in 2023, and their current ratio was 0.70. So for someone who maybe isn't super familiar with financial ratios, what does that actually tell us? And should it be cause for concern?
So a current ratio of 0.70 means that their current assets are less than their current liabilities. Ideally, you want that ratio to be above 1. It suggests they might have some, short-term challenges in meeting their obligations. However, management has stated that they expect to have adequate resources to meet those liabilities due to their strong historical and projected future cash flows. They've also got those untapped banking facilities, lines of credit that they can draw on if needed. So it's not necessarily a red flag, but it's definitely something that investors would want to keep an eye on.
Right. It's all about context. And it's
Right.
worth noting that, some current liabilities like customer advances or accrued expenses, they don't necessarily represent like immediate cash outflows in the same way that, say, accounts payable do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not always as straightforward as it might seem at first glance.
Right. And for anyone who really wants to dive into the nitty-gritty, the annual report includes the full consolidated statement of comprehensive income, which shows, all their revenues and expenses leading to their profit. They've got the consolidated balance sheet, which gives you a snapshot of their assets, liabilities, and equity at a specific point in time. And then there's the consolidated cash flow statement, which details the movement of cash both in and out of the company.
Those are like the holy trinity of financial statements.
Exactly. Now, on a slightly different note, but still related to their financials, I noticed that their audit fees went up a bit in 2023.
Oh, yeah. They paid their independent auditor around 11 million RMB, which is slightly more than the 10 million they paid in 2022. But interestingly, the fees for non-audit services actually went down from about 5 million to 3 million during that same period.
Interesting. Now, let's talk about something that's always top of mind for investor shareholder value. Specifically, what are their plans for dividends and share buybacks?
All right, so the board of directors has decided to declare a final dividend of 31.5 cents per share for 2023.
Okay.
And when you add that to the interim dividend that was already paid out, the total dividends for the year come to 67.1 cents per share.
And that represents a dividend payout ratio of roughly 50.1% of the profit attributable to equity holders.
Exactly. So basically, they're returning a little over half of their profits to shareholders in the form of dividends. It's a pretty clear signal that they're committed to rewarding their investors. However, it's worth mentioning that there's no mention of any share buyback plans in the annual report. So we can't really speculate on that front.
Fair enough. So, taking everything into account, how would you assess the overall direction of the business moving forward?
Well, one really positive sign is their increasing emphasis on ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. They're really stepping up their game in this area. They're strengthening their board leadership on ESG, giving the board overall responsibility for their ESG strategy and the results that they report. It shows that they're not just paying lip service to this stuff, they're actually making it a core part of their business.
Yeah, it's like they're taking a long-term view.
Yeah.
They're not just focused on short-term profits. They're thinking about the bigger picture.
Exactly. And their commitment to continuous innovation and standardized management, that's another big plus. They spent 2023 formulating and revising all sorts of R&D related management systems. It shows that they're constantly looking for ways to improve their operations and stay ahead of the curve.
And their sustainability efforts.
Yeah.
They're not just, setting vague goals. They've got concrete targets.
Yeah, they're aiming to increase their renewable energy usage significantly. Their long-term goal is to get it above 15% of their total energy consumption. And they're already making progress with those photovoltaic power generation projects at their facilities. They're even shooting for at least 9% of their electricity to come from renewable sources this year.
That's pretty ambitious. So, when you consider all of these different pieces, their digital transformation, the push for sustainability, their product innovation with things like the Nong line, their solid financial position, it really paints a picture of a company that's strategically positioning itself for success in the long run. But the question for you, the listener, is this. How do you think all of these different threads will ultimately converge and shape the future of China Resources Beer in what's becoming a really dynamic and competitive beverage market?
It's a fascinating question. They're making some bold moves across multiple fronts. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dives into the China Resources Bureau 2023 annual report.
We hope this has given you a clearer understanding of some of the key aspects of their business, all based on the information that was available in their annual report.
Exactly. And we hope it's been a valuable use of your time, a more efficient way to get informed than maybe trying to wade through that entire document yourself. If you're interested in learning even more, you can always check out the full annual report for all the details.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, this kind of focused analysis, going straight to the source materials, it's so important for staying on top of these complex businesses and understanding the forces that are shaping the industries that they operate in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.